So yesterday, we broke down how the Crimson Tide is set to receive a visit from not only the number one player in the nation, the number one quarterback in the nation, Arch Manning, but today, we need to break down the rest of the visitors because the Crimson Tide are playing host to an incredible haul of talent this weekend, a haul of talent you need to be aware of. Before we do, as always, y'all know the drill. I need to hear from you. Hop down to the comments, Y for yes, N for no. Are you excited that Alabama's getting in all of this talent for visits this weekend? And let me know what you're thinking. If you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Hit that bell notification because I do constant college football content, and today, I want to try something a little bit different. I want to see if we can get 100 subscribers off of this video alone by Saturday, and if we do, I'll be putting together a special video on the prospects I would love to see Alabama add in this cycle. If you enjoyed this content, be sure to like and comment down below, but having said all that, let's jump right into this, because we've already talked about Arch Manning, but he's not going to be the only quarterback in attendance, as four-star blue-chip prospect Eli Holstein is also set to be in attendance. And this is big for the Crimson Tide for a few reasons, because it goes back to something I talk about at length. This really highlights the reasons why all of these institutions want to get their high-value quarterbacks in their class early. Because we saw last summer Ty Simpson constantly making his way to Tuscaloosa to act as another recruiter for the staff. These playmakers, these guys are much more likely to commit to your class if they believe that there's a strong signal caller because it gives the class direction. And for the Tide to be able to have Eli Holstein come in this weekend in particular, I think will serve them extremely well. Because not only is Arch Manning there, not only is Eli Holstein there, and remember, the Tide staff loves the skill set Eli Holstein brings to the table, there are phenomenally talented offensive linemen in attendance. And two names that the Crimson Tide faithful are going to be very excited about are Francis Mauaoa out of IMG and Caden Proctor, two of the premier players in the entire class of 2023 regardless of position. And these are two prospects we need to be aware of, because these are guys that Alabama is going to be pushing for quite heavily. And if we start with Francis Mauaoa, this is someone out of IMG, somewhere that Alabama's had a lot of success the past few years, especially on that offensive line. And you can bet your bottom dollar they're going to be utilizing that pitch to Mauaoa, saying, hey, you could be the next in line of guys to come from IMG and end up a first-round draft pick out of the Alabama Crimson Tide. And it's going to be a pitch that's going to be tough to say no to because of the tangible results Alabama provides on the back end of that. This is a name I'm really interested in seeing because now there are big-time players in the state of Florida in terms of recruiting. We know Billy Napier is there. We know Mario Cristobal is there, and it's going to be really interesting to see how that impacts the state of Florida as a whole this cycle. But inevitably, regardless of who is in the state of Florida in terms of recruiters, this is going to be a pitch that we need to watch. This is going to be a battle we need to watch because I believe Nick Saban and the Crimson Tide are going to be pushing very heavily for Francis Mauaoa. But now we need to talk about Caden Proctor, another five-star offensive tackle who not long ago many thought was Iowa bound, but this is a battle I think we need to watch because several institutions are going to be trying to make moves to get him in. Anytime there are these five-star offensive tackles, you can bet there are going to be several institutions clamoring just to try and get in a visit. And for Alabama to be able to get in a visit from not one, not two, but a few very talented offensive linemen this weekend on the same weekend when an Eli Holstein is in town, I think that really serves the Crimson Tide well. And getting in these five-star offensive tackles is something that will definitely excite the Crimson Tide fan base, but even further than that, excite other prospects, because now they'll be able to look at the class and see, okay, well, there's a top-level quarterback, but now there's top-level offensive line play forming as well. And another name we need to be aware of, out the state of Alabama, Wilkin Formby, who just took a visit to Oklahoma and now makes his way to Tuscaloosa. And this is a name we need to watch. We've talked about the offensive line woes Alabama had last season, something they look to fix this season, but a way you make sure that doesn't happen is by having adequate depth that you have complete faith in. And it just so happens that the state of Alabama is loaded with talent this cycle, so they could stay home, get a guy right in their state in Wilkin Formby, and I think they'd be very happy with that. But now we need to talk about another five-star in attendance, five-star running back Richard Young, who many believe the Crimson Tide are the favorites to land him. And remember, at one point last year, he said that Alabama Alabama was his dream school, and now he's a 5-star, and the Crimson Tide are pushing. Once again, I love that we get in Richard Young the same weekend Eli Holstein's on campus. I think that's only going to help the Crimson Tide's pitch, but outside of that, Richard Young is one of the most intriguing prospects in all of high school football. He can make you miss, he can run you over, and he can flat out outrun you. He is a very versatile running back, and that versatility is a big reason as to why every institution in the nation would love to get him. But for Alabama, they feel very good with where they're at, and especially if they can continue impressing top-level offensive line, I think that's only going to help their chances with Richard Young, and they're already in a good position for Young. But what about another 5-star and a defensive 5-star and 5-star linebacker Anthony Hill out of Denton Ryan High School in Denton, Texas? And this is a player Alabama's been pushing for quite some time, and the Crimson Tide have been successful recruiting Denton Ryan. And this year, they're going to look to double down in the state of Texas because last year they didn't get the wins out of the state of Texas that they would have liked. And we already know, in college football, you need certain pipelines, and you need to maintain those pipelines. A pipeline to Florida is a must, but a pipeline to Texas also behooves whichever institution is able to establish it because of the amount of talent located in the state. So for Alabama, this would be a great way to show we're not leaving the state of Texas, we're still the Crimson Tide, and we just pulled in one of your top players, because 5-star linebacker Anthony Hill is one of the more interesting players in this class in terms of a skill set position. Someone that, if you look at him, looks more like a classic linebacker, real big kid, but do not let that fool you. This kid is perfectly suited for the modern game. He has great burst, he has great speed, and he plays with elite physicality, and I think that the Crimson Tide would love to get him in. But now let's talk about some other prospects, such as an athlete out the state of Oklahoma in Jacobe Johnson, another individual who's just coming off of his visit to the Oklahoma Sooners. And remember, not long ago, I talked about in a video how Oklahoma's class in the state of Oklahoma this year is actually really good, and Alabama is pushing for several of the players that are in the top of Oklahoma's class. The question is will they be successful in getting them? And Jacobe Johnson is going to be a great measuring stick, because Brent Venables and company have been able to establish a very positive relationship with Jacobe Johnson, and he's an in-state kid for them. Will the Alabama Crimson Tide be able to convince him that the Crimson Tide is the best spot for him? That remains to be seen, but what I do know is that the level of intrigue around the players in Oklahoma and the Crimson Tide's pursuit of them has certainly increased because of the recruiters that are now in the state of Oklahoma, in Brent Venables, Todd Bates. I mean, you got some real dudes at the Oklahoma Sooners right now in terms of recruiting. So, going to love to see how this battle ends up, but more importantly than that, very interested in hearing from all of you, because the Crimson Tide are set to have a very busy summer for these top-ranked prospects coming in, but this weekend is as impressive as any with the names present. And because of that, I need to hear from you. Hop down to the comments, let me know what you're thinking. That's it. See ya.